I was sitting in the HR office, my hands shaking so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. Across from me sat Catherine, the HR director, with her calm smile and perfectly organized desk. I'd finally worked up the courage to report what had been happening for months. The harassment from my supervisor, the sabotage of my projects, the way I was being systematically excluded from meetings and opportunities. "He's been undermining me constantly," I said, my voice barely steady, changing my work without telling me, then blaming me when clients complain. He makes comments about my age and my appearance in front of the team. I'd brought documentation, emails showing him taking credit for my work, messages from coworkers who'd witnessed his behavior. My hands were shaking as I slid the folder across her desk. Catherine looked through it briefly, then up at me with that same calm smile. "I understand this has been difficult for you," she said smoothly. "We take these concerns very seriously. We have a process for handling situations like this." She leaned forward slightly. "Just trust the process. We'll look into everything thoroughly." I left that office feeling lighter than I had in months. Help was finally coming. Days passed, then a week. I heard nothing from HR, no updates, no follow-up questions, nothing. But I noticed other changes. My supervisor, Blake, started acting different around me. Not better, colder, more distant. He stopped speaking to me unless absolutely necessary, stopped making eye contact in meetings. It was like I'd become invisible to him overnight. At first, I thought maybe HR had already talked to him. Maybe he was being careful now, watching his behavior. That should have been good news, but something felt wrong about it. The coldness felt calculated, deliberate. Then, in a team meeting, someone mentioned an upcoming project I'd been working on for weeks. Blake interrupted immediately. "Actually, that project's been reassigned. We're taking a different approach." He didn't look at me when he said it. Everyone else did. I felt my face burn. After the meeting, I caught my coworker Hannah in the hallway. "Did you know about the reassignment?" She looked uncomfortable. "Blake announced it yesterday, after his meeting with HR." My stomach dropped. HR had talked to him first, before getting back to me, before completing their investigation. They'd warned him I'd complained. The following week, everything changed. My workload suddenly doubled. Projects I'd never been involved with landed on my desk with impossibly short deadlines. "Need this by end of day," Blake would say, dropping files on my desk without explanation. Tasks that should have taken days were due in hours. I stayed late every night, working through lunch, trying to keep up. Then the mistakes started getting documented. A typo in a client email I'd sent at midnight after a 14-hour day. A missed deadline on a project I'd received that same morning. A formatting error in a presentation I'd had 20 minutes to review. Each one resulted in an email. "Per our conversation, this needs to be addressed." Following up on the error discussed. I'd never had these conversations, but the emails made it sound like I had, like I'd been warned and was repeatedly failing. I tried to push back once. "I don't remember us discussing this." Blake's response was immediate. "It was mentioned in the team meeting. You need to pay better attention." I checked my notes. It hadn't been mentioned. But now there was a paper trail saying I'd been told, saying I'd failed to follow through. 2 weeks after my HR meeting, Catherine called me in again. I walked into her office, hoping for an update on the investigation. Instead, she had a concerned expression that immediately put me on edge. "We've been reviewing your complaint," she began carefully, "and we've talked to several people on your team." My heart lifted slightly. They were investigating. "The consensus seems to be that what you're experiencing is more of a miscommunication than harassment," she continued. My heart dropped again. "Miscommunication?" I repeated. "Blake has a direct management style," Catherine explained. "Some people find it challenging, but his feedback has been consistent with everyone on the team, not targeted at you specifically." That wasn't true. I'd seen how he treated others. The difference was obvious. "And the comments about my appearance?" I asked. "He doesn't recall making those statements," Catherine said smoothly. "And no one else remembers hearing them." "Because he said them when we were alone," I explained, "or in small groups with people who report to him." Catherine's smile was sympathetic but firm. "I understand you're feeling stressed. Sometimes when we're under pressure, we can misinterpret intentions. read tone into things that aren't really there. She was calling me emotional, suggesting I was making things up. I felt my confidence crumbling. 3 days later, I received an email from Catherine. Subject line, Performance Development Plan. I opened it with growing dread. Following our recent discussions about workplace dynamics and performance concerns, we've developed an informal improvement plan to support your success. Performance concerns. I'd never had performance concerns before this. My last review had been excellent. The plan was vague. Improve communication with team leadership. Meet deadlines consistently. Maintain professional composure in challenging situations. There were no specific metrics, no clear goals, just subjective standards Blake could interpret however he wanted. It wasn't called formal, so it wouldn't show up in my official file, but it was there, hanging over me like a threat. I read it 3 times, hands shaking. This wasn't help. This was retaliation. They'd taken my complaint about harassment and turned it into evidence that I was the problem. My confidence, already shaken, crumbled completely. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe I had misread things. Maybe the problem really was me. I started second-guessing every interaction, every decision, every word, and that's exactly what they wanted. I decided to follow their instructions perfectly. If they wanted better communication, I'd document everything. If they wanted deadlines met, I'd work whatever hours necessary. If they wanted professionalism, I'd be flawless. I arrived early, stayed late, responded to every email within minutes, took detailed notes in every meeting. I documented everything in my personal files, screenshots of emails, recordings of meetings where it was legal, time-stamped notes of conversations. If they were building a case against me, I'd build my own defense. For 2 weeks, I was perfect, beyond perfect. I exceeded every deadline, completed every task, made 0 mistakes. My coworker Hannah noticed. "You're working yourself to death," she said quietly one evening when we were both still in the office at 8. "I have to," I said. "They're watching everything I do." "I know," she said, and something in her tone made me look up. She knew something. Then Catherine called me in again. "We've noticed improvement," she said with that same calm smile. "Your recent work has been much better." I felt a flash of hope. Maybe this was over. "Let's schedule a check-in next week," she continued, "just to make sure we're on track." The hope died instantly. The next meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. Catherine had someone else with her this time, another HR representative named Marcus, who I'd never met before. They both had folders, prepared notes. This was rehearsed. "We wanted to follow up on the concerns raised last month," Catherine began, reading from her notes, "about the team dynamics communication challenges." Team dynamics, communication challenges. Those weren't my words. I'd reported harassment and sabotage. "After thorough review," Marcus continued, also reading from prepared notes, "we've determined this situation stems from conflicting work styles and team conflict rather than policy violations." They were rewriting what I'd reported, turning harassment into a personality clash. "The documentation you provided showed instances of standard management feedback and normal project reassignments," Catherine added. Standard management feedback, normal reassignments. I documented him stealing my work, excluding me from meetings, making inappropriate comments. "We encourage both parties to work on communication and mutual understanding," Marcus concluded. Both parties. Like I was equally responsible, like I'd done something wrong by reporting abuse. They slid a paper across the desk, a summary of our meetings. I read through it, feeling sick. My words were there, but twisted, rewritten to sound like I was complaining about being given feedback, about normal workplace challenges. "This doesn't sound like what I said," I protested. Catherine's smile never wavered. "This is our official summary. Please sign acknowledging receipt." I didn't sign, but the document went in my file anyway. A week later, I learned I'd been removed from consideration for a promotion. I'd been working toward a senior specialist role for a year. Everyone knew I was next in line. The position had been posted internally, and I'd submitted my application immediately. My qualifications were perfect. My performance history was strong. I should have been a lock. Then Blake got promoted to senior manager, and suddenly, the senior specialist role I'd been promised went to someone else. "We decided to go in a different direction," Catherine told me when I asked. "A different direction," I repeated. We felt the role needed someone with a different skill set. What skill set? I asked. I have every qualification listed. It's not about qualifications, she said smoothly. It's about fit and timing. Timing, I echoed. Yes, with the recent performance discussions, we thought it might be premature. There it was. The informal improvement plan I'd never agreed to, never signed, was being used to block my advancement. This is retaliation, I said quietly. Catherine's expression didn't change. This is a normal business decision based on current performance and organizational needs. The timing is coincidental. It wasn't coincidental. It was calculated. They were systematically dismantling my career. 2 days later, Hannah pulled me aside in the break room. She checked to make sure we were alone before speaking. You need to be careful, she said in a low voice. I looked at her. What do you mean? HR isn't helping you, she said. They're building a case, a paper trail. The words hit me like cold water. What? I've seen this before, Hannah continued quietly. Someone reports harassment or discrimination. HR starts documenting everything they do wrong, creating performance issues where none existed. Then they terminate them for cause. But Catherine said they take complaints seriously, I protested weakly. They do. Seriously enough to make sure the company is protected from lawsuits. She glanced at the door. They're not investigating whether Blake harassed you. They're building documentation that you're a problem employee. So when they fire you, it looks justified. How do you know? I asked. Because I watched them do it to someone else, she said. 2 years ago. Same pattern, same outcome. The phrase paper trail echoed in my head. All those documented mistakes, the performance plan, the meeting summaries that twisted my words. It wasn't about helping me improve. It was about creating justification to fire me. I'd trusted the process. The process was designed to erase me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I requested my complete HR file the next morning. It took them 3 days to provide it. When I finally got it, I sat in my car in the parking lot and read through everything. Pages were missing. The original complaint I'd filed was there, but my attached documentation wasn't. The emails showing Blake stealing credit, the messages from witnesses, all gone. The meeting summaries were there, but they'd been edited. Phrases I'd never said were attributed to me directly. I feel targeted had become, I feel the feedback is unfair. He's sabotaging my projects had become, I'm struggling with the project workload. Every statement had been softened, reframed, made to sound like I was complaining about normal work stress, and there were notes I'd never seen. Employee appears emotionally unstable. Difficulty accepting constructive feedback. Concerning pattern of blaming others for performance issues. I'd never said or done anything to justify those characterizations, but there they were in my file. The truth of what was happening crystallized with perfect, horrible clarity. They weren't documenting what was really happening. They were creating a narrative, a story where I was the problem employee, where my firing would be justified, expected, deserved. I stopped sleeping properly. Every night, I'd replay conversations in my head, every meeting with Catherine, every interaction with Blake, every email I'd sent, looking for the moment where I'd made the fatal mistake, looking for where I'd given them ammunition to use against me. The anxiety was constant, a weight in my chest that never lifted. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, heart racing, running through worst-case scenarios. During the day, I moved through the office like a ghost, hyper-aware of every word I said, every email I sent, every deadline. I knew they were watching, waiting for me to slip, waiting for a reason to add more documentation to my file. My work became my entire life. I had no energy for anything else. Stopped seeing friends. Stopped exercising. Stopped doing anything except trying to be perfect enough that they couldn't find fault. It wasn't sustainable. I knew it wasn't sustainable, but I didn't know what else to do. Then one sleepless night at 2 in the morning, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I had a realization. I couldn't keep trusting them. I couldn't keep following their process. The process was the trap. I had to stop trusting and start protecting myself. I started building my own evidence, systematically, carefully. I saved every email to a personal account, not forwarding them, which they could track, but taking screenshots, detailed screenshots showing timestamps, full message threads, everything. I recorded meetings where it was legal to do so. One-party consent meant I could record conversations I was part of without telling the other person. I documented every interaction in a private journal. Date, time, who was present, what was said, exact quotes when possible. I created a timeline: when I'd filed the complaint, when the workload increased, when the performance plan appeared, when I lost the promotion. The pattern was undeniable. I backed everything up. Cloud storage they couldn't access. USB drives I kept at home. Multiple copies. I also started documenting the good things. Client emails praising my work, colleagues asking for my help, projects I'd successfully completed, evidence that I was actually a strong performer despite what HR's narrative claimed. And slowly, as I built this record, something became crystal clear. This wasn't random. This wasn't about my performance. This was a system, a process. Complaints triggered performance plans. Performance plans created documentation. Documentation justified termination. The process I'd been told to trust was actually a well-oiled machine designed to push out problem employees. Employees like me who dared to complain. I started researching. Late nights on employment law websites, reading case studies, looking for patterns. What I discovered made me sick. This was common, standard practice at many companies. When an employee reports harassment or discrimination, HR doesn't actually investigate fairly. They investigate strategically. They protect the company from liability. And the easiest way to protect the company is to get rid of the complaining employee. Make the problem go away. They do it through documentation, performance improvement plans, restructuring, position eliminated, not a good fit, performance-based termination. All legal, all justified on paper, all designed to avoid wrongful termination lawsuits. The process wasn't about fairness. It was about risk management. I found forum after forum of people sharing similar stories. I reported discrimination and got fired 3 months later for performance issues. HR said they'd investigate. Instead, they documented everything I did wrong. I trusted the process. The process destroyed my career. I wasn't alone. This happened to thousands of people every year. People who did exactly what they were supposed to do, reported problems through official channels, trusted HR to help, and got systematically eliminated. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed, to protect the company, never the employee. The final review meeting was scheduled for a Friday afternoon, 2 weeks' notice. Catherine and Marcus would both be present. Blake was invited as relevant management. I knew what was coming. I could feel it. The way people avoided eye contact, the way conversations stopped when I entered a room, the way Blake looked at me with barely concealed satisfaction. I spent those 2 weeks preparing, updating my resume, applying to jobs, getting my documentation in perfect order. On Friday, I walked into that conference room with my shoulders back. Catherine and Marcus sat on one side of the table. Blake sat at the end, arms crossed. "Thank you for joining us," Catherine began, her tone professional but cold. The warmth from our first meeting was completely gone. She slid a folder across the table. "After careful review of your performance over the past several months, we've made the difficult decision to terminate your employment." My hands didn't shake this time. "On what grounds?" I asked calmly. "Performance-based termination," Marcus said. "As documented in your file, there have been ongoing concerns about meeting expectations, communication challenges, and workplace conduct." Workplace conduct. I'd never had a conduct violation in my life, until I reported harassment. "We've followed all proper procedures," Catherine continued. "You were given clear feedback and opportunities to improve. Unfortunately, the improvement we hoped to see hasn't materialized." I sat there looking at the three of them. Blake's barely hidden smirk, Marcus's professional detachment, Catherine's calm efficiency. They'd planned this from the moment I walked into that office 2 months ago. Every meeting, every email, every piece of documentation, all leading to this moment. "Your final paycheck will include payment through today plus accrued vacation time," Catherine said. "We'll need your badge, laptop, and any company materials before you leave." "We wish you the best in your future endeavors," Marcus added. The corporate script, the polite fiction. Blake didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His expression said everything. I stood up slowly. "I'll need a copy of my complete personnel file," I said. "You'll receive that within the standard time frame," Catherine replied. "I want it today," I said firmly, "before I leave this building." Something in my tone made her pause. That's unusual. It's my legal right, I said, and I want it today. She exchanged a glance with Marcus. We can arrange that. I walked out of that office with my box of belongings and my complete file. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what I had waiting for them. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just breathing, trying to process what had just happened. I'd known it was coming, but knowing and experiencing are different things. The humiliation of being walked out, the finality of that badge being taken, the way Blake had looked at me. I cried, hard, ugly crying that I'd been holding back for weeks. But when the tears stopped, something else took their place. Clarity. I pulled out my phone and started going through the evidence I'd collected. Every email, every recording, every documented interaction. The timeline was damning. I filed the complaint on March 15th. The workload increased on March 18th. The first performance concern email came March 22nd. The informal improvement plan appeared March 29th. The promotion opportunity disappeared April 12th. The termination meeting was May 10th, less than 2 months from complaint to firing, and every single step was documented in my personal files. Not the story they told in HR meetings, the real story. I'd trusted the process, but I'd also protected myself. And now it was time to use that protection. I drove home, made coffee, and started organizing everything into a comprehensive file. Then I scheduled a consultation with an employment lawyer. The lawyer's name was Patricia. She specialized in wrongful termination and retaliation cases. I sent her everything before our meeting, all my documentation, the timeline, the recordings, the emails. Her assistant called 2 days later to schedule a meeting. Patricia's office was small, but professional. She was in her 50s, direct, no nonsense. She had my file spread across her desk when I arrived. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to a chair. I sat. She looked at me for a long moment. "This isn't just wrongful termination," she said finally. "This is textbook retaliation, documented, systematic, and remarkably stupid on their part." "Stupid?" I asked. "They followed their process. They documented everything." "Exactly," Patricia said. "They documented everything, including the fact that all these performance issues started immediately after you filed a harassment complaint, including meeting notes where they twisted your words, including removing you from a promotion you were qualified for." She tapped the timeline. "This is so obvious, it's almost insulting. They didn't even try to hide it." "So what do we do?" I asked. She smiled. "We send them a letter, a very detailed letter explaining exactly what we know and exactly what laws they violated, and then we wait." "For what?" "For them to panic," she said. The letter went out 3 days later. The response was immediate. Catherine called my cell phone within 2 hours of receiving the letter. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her calm, professional tone was gone. "This is Catherine from HR. We received a letter from your attorney and would really like to have a conversation before this goes any further. Please call me back as soon as possible." She called 3 more times that day. Then Marcus called. Then someone from corporate legal. I forwarded every message to Patricia. "Don't respond," she advised. "Let them sweat." 2 days later, they requested a formal meeting. "They want to talk settlement," Patricia explained. "That was fast." "Because they know they're screwed," she said. "Everything they did is documented, by them, in your file, and now they know you have evidence they don't control." The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Downtown office, conference room. Their lawyers on one side. Patricia and me on the other. Catherine was there. So was Marcus. And Blake's supervisor, someone from corporate leadership I'd never met. The HR representatives who'd smiled so calmly while destroying my career now looked nervous. Uncertain. Their power had shifted, and they knew it. "We'd like to discuss a resolution," their lead attorney began. Patricia smiled. "We're listening." Their first offer was insulting. 3 months' salary, a neutral reference, standard severance agreement. "That's what you offer someone who quit," Patricia said, "not someone you retaliated against and illegally terminated." "We dispute the characterization of retaliation," their attorney responded. Patricia pulled out the timeline. March 15th, harassment complaint filed. March 18th, workload doubled. March 22nd, first negative documentation. "Should I continue?" The attorney's expression tightened. March 29th, performance improvement plan that appeared in no previous reviews. April 12th, qualified candidate mysteriously removed from promotion consideration. May 10th, termination. Less than 2 months from protected activity to firing. She slid the timeline across the table. You don't have a case, you have a pattern, and patterns are very easy to explain to juries. Catherine shifted uncomfortably. We followed all proper procedures. You followed a process designed to push out employees who complain, Patricia interrupted. We have recordings of meetings where her words were twisted, emails that contradict your official summaries, witnesses who will testify to the harassment she reported. She leaned forward. You didn't investigate her complaint. You managed her out. That's retaliation, and it's illegal. The room went silent. We need to caucus, their attorney said. Take your time, Patricia replied. We refused their first offer, and their second, and their third. While negotiations dragged on, something else happened. The company hired an external firm to conduct an internal investigation. Not into my complaint. That ship had sailed, into HR practices generally. Patricia had insisted on it as part of any settlement. If they're doing this to you, they're doing it to others, she'd said. We make them look at the whole system. The investigation started quietly. Emails were subpoenaed. HR files were reviewed. Current and former employees were interviewed. I wasn't privy to most of it. But Patricia got updates. They found a pattern, she told me 3 weeks in. Multiple complaints over the past 5 years. Same process every time. Complaint filed, performance issues appear, termination within 90 days. How many people? I asked. At least 15 they've identified so far. Probably more. 15 people who'd trusted the process, who'd reported problems through official channels, who'd been systematically eliminated. What happens to them? I asked. That depends, Patricia said. If they want to come forward, we might have a class action. But the immediate impact was internal. The investigation exposed senior leadership, showed them exactly what their HR department had been doing, showed them the legal liability they'd created. Within a week, there were changes. Blake was suspended pending review. Catherine and Marcus were placed on administrative leave. The entire HR complaint process was frozen while they overhauled it. The company went into damage control mode. New HR director brought in from outside, new policies drafted, training scheduled for all managers. They wanted to settle, fast, before more employees came forward, before the story went public. The final offer was comprehensive. Full compensation for lost wages and emotional distress, complete medical coverage for 2 years, positive references in writing, official correction of my personnel file, removal of all negative documentation, and a public acknowledgement that I'd been wrongfully terminated. Not a quiet settlement where I disappeared. Accountability. This is a good offer, Patricia said. Better than most retaliation cases get. What about the others? I asked. The 15 people they did this to? The investigation is ongoing. Several are considering legal action. This case makes theirs stronger. I looked at the settlement terms. Everything I'd wanted when I first walked into Catherine's office. Protection. Justice, acknowledgement of what had happened. There's one more thing I want, I said. Patricia raised an eyebrow. I want to tell my story, publicly. That's risky, she cautioned. It could affect the settlement. Then we make it part of the settlement, I said. They don't get to silence me. That's non-negotiable. She smiled. Let me make a call. The investigation revealed something that made the whole thing even worse. HR had quotas. Not official ones, nothing in writing, but there were targets for risk reduction. Employees who filed complaints were flagged as risks. Risks needed to be managed, and the most efficient way to manage risk was to eliminate it. Catherine and Marcus had been rewarded for keeping complaint resolutions low, for protecting the company from liability, for maintaining a smooth, problem-free appearance. They did that by making the problems go away. The employees who complained weren't people to them. We were numbers. Risks to be managed. Liabilities to be reduced. The harassment we reported didn't matter. Our careers didn't matter. Our mental health didn't matter. What mattered was protecting the company, keeping things quiet, maintaining the appearance that everything was fine. Trust the process wasn't reassurance. It was a script. A way to keep us compliant while they built cases against us. A way to make us believe help was coming while they systematically destroyed our credibility. Every email telling us to follow proper channels was a trap. Every meeting where they smiled and took notes was theater. Every promise that they took complaints seriously was a lie. They took complaints seriously enough to eliminate the people who made them. That's what the process really was. Not protection, not justice. Elimination disguised as procedure. The final settlement was signed in June. 3 months after I'd been fired, I received full compensation. My file was corrected and sealed. I got positive references in writing, and I retained the right to discuss my experience publicly as long as I didn't disclose specific settlement terms. The company issued a statement acknowledging procedural failures in handling employee complaints and committed to comprehensive reform of HR practices. Corporate speak for "we got caught." Catherine and Marcus were terminated, not for what they'd done to me specifically, for creating systemic liability, for putting the company at legal risk. Blake was demoted and transferred. His promotion was revoked. The senior specialist position I'd been denied was offered to me. I turned it down. I didn't want to work for a company that had to be sued into basic decency, but the offer itself was vindication. Proof that the performance issues they documented were fiction. Proof that I'd been qualified all along. Proof that everything they'd said about me was a lie they'd created. Several of the other 15 employees did file legal actions. My case gave them a roadmap. The company settled most of them quickly, quietly. Some people took the money and moved on. Others, like me, insisted on more, on acknowledgement, on change. I decided to share my story publicly, not for revenge, for warning. I wrote everything down, not names, not specific settlement details, but the pattern. The process, what to watch for. I posted it anonymously on a career forum. If HR tells you to trust the process, here's what the process really is. I detailed the warning signs, how complaints trigger documentation, how performance plans appear out of nowhere, how words get twisted in official summaries, how employees get managed out while being told they're being helped. The post went viral. Thousands of shares in the first week. Comments poured in from people who'd experienced the same thing. This happened to me exactly. I thought I was the only one. I trusted them, and they destroyed my career. Former coworkers reached out privately, people I'd worked with who'd wondered what really happened. I told them. Some were shocked. Others weren't surprised. We knew something was wrong, one said, but we didn't know how to help. The story spread beyond the forum. Employment blogs picked it up. Legal websites referenced it. HR professionals wrote think pieces about it, some defending the system, others admitting the problem was real. The company issued a response, professional, carefully worded. We're committed to continuous improvement in our employee relations practices. They didn't deny anything. They couldn't. The truth was out. Looking back now, I can see everything clearly. HR was never there to protect me. It was there to protect the company. From lawsuits, from liability, from bad publicity, from employees like me who dared to report problems. When Catherine told me to trust the process, she wasn't offering help. She was starting a countdown. The process was designed to document, discredit, and dispose, to turn victims into problems, to turn complaints into performance issues, to turn employees into former employees, cleanly, legally, with perfect paper trails that justified everything. I trusted them because I thought we were on the same side. I thought HR existed to help employees, to investigate fairly, to protect people from abuse. I was wrong. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed, to silence complaints by silencing the people who made them. But I learned something else too. Documentation works both ways. The same tools they used to build a case against me, I used to defend myself. The same process they designed to eliminate me became the evidence that exposed them. They told me to trust the process. I did, just not their version of it. I trusted my own process, my own documentation, my own protection, and that's what saved me. The story I want people to hear isn't just mine. It's a warning. When someone in power tells you to trust them, trust yourself more. Document everything. Protect yourself first, because the process might not be what you think it is.